Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I'm Ryan Wormeli, joined on this Friday morning by Pat Fitzmaurice and by Derek Brown. Fellas, we are into week 4. We had Thursday night football last night. Malik Nabers tweeting earlier today that he, seems to be okay. Obviously suffers a concussion. Not what you want to see from a guy who has unsurprisingly really taken the league by storm. CeeDee Lamb having a good game. Not much else going on throughout that one. Debra, any takeaways from Thursday night football this week?
Well, we're talking about a little bit of dynasty stuff before we turned on the mics. You remember when it was controversial to call Malik Nabers the wide receiver 1 in this class? I remember that. Kind of crazy, huh? He's straight baller, and he's one of the best wide receivers in the NFL already.
He looks amazing. I think where would you rank him in dynasty? I guess that's a good question.
I'm actually updating my dynasty ranks right now, and I've got him, I want to say I have him top 5 amongst I've got him wide receiver 5 right now, right behind Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Chase, and Amon-Ra St. Brown.
I feel like the first 3 you can't even really have a conversation. Maybe by the end of the season it'll be different, but the first 3, I think Chase, Jefferson, Lamb in some order is kind of non-negotiable. I think 4 is where you can start at least making the case, right?
Yeah, agreed.
I think we can negotiate with Chase and Nabers. I think I'm willing to engage in that negotiation. Wow. I think that's a close call.
Well, Fitz and I, for everybody listening, are going to be doing a Dynasty show next week on Tuesday. We're actually going to be going live on Discord Stages, and we're going to be doing half of that's going to be a show of the two of us kind of updating on trade values in Dynasty, and the other half is going to be actually taking your questions. So if you want to discuss that and actually pose that question to us and talk it out on that Stages, be sure to check that out. I believe that's at 5 p.m. Eastern next Tuesday. We're going to be trying doing that at the start of every month in season. But yeah, I mean, Nabers sure looks darn good. And while I might disagree that there's a conversation at 3, I don't think you're totally insane for saying that. He's looked awesome. Lamb, of course, 7 catches, 98 yards and a touchdown. So he was good as well. Fitz, any other takeaways from that one last night?
So Daniel Jones is at least functional. And I know Daniel Jones gets a lot of grief, but when there are really bad quarterback situations in the NFL, like what we're seeing with the Dolphins post Tua, what we saw out of the Panthers before they made the quarterback change from Bryce Young to Andy Dalton, you just want a quarterback. I know Daniel Jones is not taking the Giants to the promised land, but he at least can keep Malik Nabers a valuable fantasy asset. Devin Singletary, rough game last night, but he's been a valuable asset. Even Wan'Dale Robinson is giving us fantasy value this year. So at least respect that Daniel Jones is a functional driver of an offense, if not the quarterback we hoped he'd be coming out of Duke.
Yeah, the target breakdown in this game is ridiculous, by the way. Malik Nabers, 15 targets. Wan'Dale Robinson, 14. He had 11 catches and 71 yards. Debra, what did you think watching him?
I mean, we talked about him on the waiver wire show. I put him inside of my top 5 ads of the week. And I mean, it just really, you look at the target totals and it's like spot the outlier, 12, 4, 8, 14. He's getting a ton of work in this offense. He is the clear wide receiver 2 and just a PPR machine. Any weeks, if he keeps getting this type of volume, any weeks he gets a touchdown, he's going to be a top 24 wide receiver. And we probably should be ranking him, if this continues, as a consistent wide receiver 3 weekly, boys. Am I wrong with that?
What do you think, Fitz?
No, I mean, it's just very little touchdown potential, very little big play potential. But he is a PPR asset without question. So, I mean, he's probably going to be more like a fringy wide receiver 3 for me in the rankings most weeks if we're ranking in half PPR. But there is a steadiness there that people are going to appreciate if they have Wan'Dale on their rosters when the bye weeks hit starting in week 5.
By the way, I can't remember the exact numbers. I'm trying to find them on Twitter right now, and I can't recall the tweet I saw last night. But it was something, I believe the threshold was 30 catches, 300 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Nabers is the only rookie receiver to do that in his first few games ever. There are other people, Puka had more receptions than he did, and other receivers have had more touchdowns. But to do all 3 catches, yards, and touchdowns, again, I think those are the thresholds, 30, 303. Nabers is the only one. So just to kind of put a bow on that, dude is awesome. Like I said, this is our Friday show. We're going to be running through our biggest questions of the weekend slate. Quick reminder for everyone that all of our week 4 consensus rankings and tiers can be found at fantasypros.com/rankings. Also a reminder, if you're juggling multiple fantasy football teams and feeling overwhelmed, Fantasy Pros will help you simplify things. With Fantasy Pros Multi-League Assistant, you can see the latest news, notes, and rankings for every single player across all your teams. It's all in one spot, making your path to victory clearer and easier. Dive in and let us help you dominate all your leagues with the Multi-League Assistant at fantasypros.com/myplaybook or on the Fantasy Football My Playbook app. All right, guys, let's start off with Bengals at Panthers, an interesting, surprising revenge game here. We have to talk about Andy Dalton and what we saw out of week 3. For a time, he was the only quarterback in football to have a 300-yard and 3-touchdown passing game this season. That was matched by other quarterbacks later in the week 3 slate. But was this Andy Dalton explosion a flash in the pan, or is this something close to the new normal for the Panthers as long as Bryce Young is benched? Debra, I'll start with you.
I mean, it's the improvement of the offense is not an anomaly. The question is how high? Are we going to see Andy Dalton doing what he did last week on a weekly basis? Probably not. I mean, considering especially their upcoming schedule, they get Chicago, Atlanta, some good defenses there. Then they get Washington, so maybe a bounce back game there. But can he keep it rolling versus the Bengals? Maybe so. I mean, their pass defense hasn't been tested as much. Like, they're bottom 5 against pass attempts faced, and you look at all the other metrics, like 12th highest yards per attempt given up, 7th highest passer rating given up. Can Dalton do it this week? Yes. But can he do it consistently going forward in the weeks to come? We shall see.
This week, though, that Bengals defense, not good at all. We just saw them get absolutely shredded on Monday
Cam Taylor-Britt probably needs to walk away from Mike's this week. Just saying.
Yeah, maybe. Fitz, what do you think? But both for this week, where I think we're all kind of in agreement that it's an appetizing matchup versus kind of the rest of the season for Dalton.
Yeah, so we're not expecting 437 yards of offense every week like we got against the Raiders last week. But yeah, there it is. As Debra was mentioning, the matchup thing. And this week going against a Bengal defense that has maybe like one really good player with Trey Hendrickson. I think the Bengals are 24th overall in DVOA on defense. So yeah, I mean, ginger power here with Andy Dalton. And what I was talking about earlier with Daniel Jones, we just want like functionality out of the offenses that don't have definitive answers at quarterback. And we're getting functionality now from the Panthers. Deontay Johnson has gone from completely unplayable with Bryce Young to a must start. Chuba Hubbard, who was actually doing okay with Bryce Young, is now kind of an appealing RB2 play. So I don't know if the fantasy value is going to extend to anyone beyond that, but at least those two guys are very viable now with Dalton at quarterback.
The other name I wanted to bring up, and this is obviously more of a rest of season view than week 4 because he's not playing week 4, but Debra, Jonathan Brooks, does this make you more interested in him for when he's back on the field? I mean, Chuba Hubbard is somebody that we're ranking inside the top 20 on expert consensus rankings right now, or at least for this particular matchup. So he is looking good. It's not like maybe that spot has been vacated, but just if the offense is getting better as a whole, does that make Brooks more appealing?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you go from an offense that wasn't functional at all, can't move the ball, and the quarterback looks lost, to, we have functional quarterback play. And it's a tide that raises all boats. So Jonathan Brooks, like right now, is the time you need to be trying to trade for him. Before we get all the stuff about him ramping up and he's going to play and he's going to be back in week 5, week 6, and he's a full go week 7, week 8, things like that. This is the time right now you need to be sending out offers and try to get him on your team.
I'm gonna push back on the Jonathan Brooks thing a little, Debra. I don't think people should be looking at him as a potential savior. I think that's a big mistake. Like the Panthers,
you think Chuba keeps the role?
The Panthers, I don't know if he keeps the role, but he's going to keep a role. The Panthers have no incentive to give Jonathan Brooks a workhorse role coming off a major knee injury in a season where they are not harboring any sort of playoff aspirations. Like, it's just completely illogical. So I think they're going to work him in slowly. I think it's going to be like probably at its peak, maybe he gets to 60-40. I think it probably looks more like 50-50.
The other thing along those lines too, Debro, is like you did just kind of highlight why it's not the easiest schedule, kind of the rest of the way after this week, and we don't get the benefit of him this week. So maybe that kind of plays in your mind as well. I think he's somebody worth acquiring, but maybe it's a good point by Fitz to at least not view him as like, oh, he's just going to step in and become a league winner and save your roster. But I think you're right, Debro, about this is the time if you want to acquire him, this is the time to go buy before the whispers of, oh, he's going to be back, any day now, like start to kind of get louder.
But if he gets, I guess I'll push back to Fitzy here. If he gets the 60% roll, is he not an RB2 on a weekly basis? And he gets the red zone roll?
Yeah, I mean, but it's an if that he gets to 60. I don't think that's a given. There is no incentive to give him more than 15 touches a game.
I just don't see a way why you would play Chuba Hubbard, who is gone off this team afterwards, like outside of playing Jonathan Brooks, if he's ready to go health wise.
Because they are really short on blue chip assets, and why are they going to risk his health in a lost season?
But if he's healthy, if he's good to go, then why are you not going to play him? Like, that's the only thing.
I mean, he's going to be good to go, but he is coming off a major knee surgery. Like, I don't know. It's just, it doesn't seem like they are going to immediately start giving him 20 touches. I'm just thinking that's kind of a leap of faith people are making. I mean, I know one user on Discord just asked me whether he should trade Christian McCaffrey for Jonathan Brooks.
Oh, well, I agree with you there. That's too much.
Yeah.
And
why would you? Right. McCaffrey is a definitive answer, even if he has kind of a slow ramp up upon his return. Yeah. Eventually, like for the most important games of the season, he is going to be a guy you want in your lineup. And Jonathan Brooks is a great unknown. And I just think the ceiling is maybe less, not quite as high as some people think it might be.
Yeah. I don't disagree. Like, I don't think he gets like bell cow usage down the stretch, but like 65% of the work. Yeah, I could see that.
I actually don't think that's as crazy of a question posed to you, Fitz. I wouldn't do it. Like, I'd prefer the McCaffrey side, but I just don't want to have any McCaffrey. I'm like very nervous. Like when you're
I understand.
Germany,
Right.
I'm worried about CMC.
I understand. And, having McCaffrey, it's just kind of a headache on your roster right now, but still the potential upside versus we're talking about two guys who aren't playing right now and you're hoping for value down the road. I would much rather bet on value out of Christian McCaffrey down the road than the totally unproven, coming off a major knee injury, Jonathan Brooks.
That's a good way to frame it. Let's go to question number 2 here. Vikings at Packers. My question here, almost regardless of whether or not Jordan Love is back starting, but let's say even if he is, which in a vacuum is ideal scenario for the Packers, how much do we trust this Green Bay offense going up against a Brian Flores-led Vikings defense that has shut down some pretty good offenses so far this season? Fitz, I'll start with you here.
Yeah, I'm dialing down expectations, I think, for the Green Bay passing game. I bet the under on passing yards for Jordan Love at 241.5. I think that Matt LaFleur will want to run the ball to keep Jordan Love from being overexposed to a very dangerous Vikings pass rush. Since Brian Flores, the Minnesota defensive coordinator, he brings pressure from unexpected places. Like, you never know who's coming in the pass rush when you're going up against Minnesota. And that's a tough situation for a quarterback who might have compromised mobility coming off this knee injury. So I think Josh Jacobs is a really good bet for fantasy this week. But I'm kind of tepid on all the other Packers except maybe Jaden Reed, who in 17 regular season games with Jordan Love has 12 touchdowns.
Do you think, Fitz, and as of right now, correct me if I'm wrong, I haven't seen like any kind of official, like he's definitely going to be back or definitely going to be out this week. Do you as a Packers fan, do you want him to play this week? On the one hand, it's like, okay, you're going up against a division rival that's 3-0. It's an important game early in the season. On the other hand, given the way this defense plays, I almost wouldn't want my compromised franchise quarterback. I'd say just give him another week, and if we lose, we lose. But like, let's not risk him getting blitzed to death and getting hurt even worse. I mean, do you think that they're gonna what would you do? I guess would you bring him back given the defense they're facing?
Yeah, I mean, that's a hard question to answer, not knowing what his medical status is.
Yeah.
I'd obviously want all that information, but right now my stance is basically that, yes, I'm hoping Jordan Love plays, but I will not be totally disappointed if it's Malik Willis.
Debra, what are you doing with this offense? Again, regardless of whether or not Jordan Love is playing, considering the defense they're going up against.
Well, I just tailed Pat and bet the under on passing yards, so I don't know if how much that tells you, but I think it's a sharp bet. But looking at, I'm just going to echo a lot what Pat said. I do think Jordan Love starts this week. I think he was close to playing, but I never actually thought he was going to play last week. As much as the media tried to push that, I thought it was smoke and mirrors. I think he does play. I think he's probably functional enough to play. And LaFleur, dude, if you could scheme things around Malik Willis with barely knowing the playbook because he was barely on the team long enough to digest the playbook, then I think there shouldn't be a problem scheming stuff up for Jordan Love, get the ball out of his hands real fast, and lean on the running game. And I'll echo what Fitzy said. Like, if I got to pick any Packers wide receiver to believe in, it's going to be Jayden Reed. And a lot of this comes to the coverage matchup. Minnesota has the highest too high rate in the NFL. You look at last year, because Green Bay hasn't faced a lot of too high this year, the lowest rate in the NFL so far. So you got to look back to more of last year to get any kind of sample size. But Jayden Reed was their guy against too high, 25% target per route run rate, second in yards per route run. And Byron Murphy has been a turnstile in the slot. So I think if you're looking at coverage matchup, you're looking at corner matchup and things like that, as well as we could see more of the pop pass stuff, more of the reverses, more of the Jayden Reed doing the, Dairy Belt, Debo Samuel kind of stuff this week to take some of the volume away from Jacobs and make things a little bit easier for Jordan Love.
Dairy Belt Debo. I love that, Debo. It's fantastic.
Yeah. I try to be sensitive for those that are lactose intolerant out there, but I still think it fits.
By the way, Jordan Love. So if you go to, we have this brand new tool we dropped this week with Fantasy Pros called the Are They Playing tool, and it uses some AI and is some kind of past data to kind of put together an all-encompassing estimate on guys and whether or not they're going to have a chance to play. It gets more accurate throughout the week as we get more and more practice data. So as we sit here on Friday morning, through all the Thursday practice information, Jordan Love, according to this new tool, is being given an 80% chance to play this week. So that is actually even higher than I expected it to see it. So it seems like there's a reasonable chance to expect he might be back out there, even if still somewhat limited. So that will be nice just to see him back on the field for sure. Let's go to question 3. Jaguars at Texans. Are there any concerns for Houston, or do we expect a major get-right game at home against this terrible Jacksonville team, T-Bro?
I think it's CJ Stroud week. When Ethan, our beautiful graphic artist, designer, wonderful man, reached out to me and said, who do you want to be the poster person for the primer this week? And I was like, it's got to be CJ Stroud. It's got to be CJ Stroud or Nico Collins. I think this is the get right game. And speaking of, when talking about that too, Tank Dell, based off of our Are They Playing tool, 21% chance to play. He's dealing with a rib issue and stuff like that. So I don't think he suits up. But again, I don't think that it matters that much. Stephon Diggs, Nico Collins, as long as Nico is good to go, then Stroud has all the weapons he needs to tear apart this Jaguars secondary, which has been bad. And the thing about the Houston offensive line, they've been allowing a lot of pressure. Jacksonville's 6th lowest in pressure. So CJ Stroud's going to get clean pockets, and then he's going to be able to tear apart a secondary that is bottom 10 in passing yards allowed per game, yards per attempt, and CPOE. So welcome to CJ Stroud week, people. It's going to be pretty.
Debra, are you interested in anybody in the Texans backfield in this one? Mixon, missed practice Wednesday and Thursday. And if we're expecting a big game from the offense, is there anybody else that you're interested in, or it's only the passing game you want to be invested in?
This has been a pass funnel defense. Jacksonville might be bad at a lot of things, offense, pass defense, all the really important things, but they are good at stopping the run. So I'm not very high on Cam Akers. I don't think that Joe Mixon or Dameon Pierce play. I think you're probably going to see a lot, considering I think they are going to go pass heavy. I think you're going to see a lot of Dare Ogunbowale, more than people that are playing Cam Akers want to see this week. So no, count me out of both the running backs.
Fitz, what do you expect out of the Texans this week? And the one thing I will mention for the Jags defensively is they got absolutely the doors blown off them in week 3, of course. The first 2 weeks, they didn't give up more than 20 points in a game. So it's not like they're dropping, teams are dropping 35 points on them right and left. Now, one of those was against Deshaun Watson, who's quite bad. The other one was against the Dolphins when Tua was still healthy. So I'm not saying that I believe in this Jags team, but just trying to play devil's advocate a bit. Like, how much of this is just an MVP level Josh Allen torched them in prime time, and like now we're just assuming they're so terrible, even though the first couple of weeks they weren't that atrocious. What do you think, Fitz?
All right. First of all, Debro mentioned Ethan, one of the unsung heroes here at Fantasy Pros. Gotta send a birthday shout out to Ethan.
Yes. Happy birthday to Ethan.
Today. So, yeah. So Ethan's awesome. So I hear what you're saying, Worm, but still, just this is a pass defense you want to attack, and I think as Debro said, maybe you're not that excited about starting Cam Akers against this pass funnel Jags defense, but does look like a great bounce back spot for CJ Stroud. And the fact that this target tree has now been pruned, because it looks like Tank Dell is not going to play with wrist and ribs injuries. So that means the targets are really going to be concentrated toward Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs. And it looks like a smash spot for both of those guys. I've got, I think Nico Collins ranked like wide receiver 6 this week. And Diggs, I think I've got in my top 20.
Yeah, I agree. And I want to note here, Tua did rip them up for 338 and 9.1 yards per attempt in week 1. Because he's probably out there on a few waiver wires right now, if you are hurting at tight end, this could give a small bump to Dalton Schultz. Like, I'm not saying that I'm going to rank him as a top 12 guy, but if you are struggling and he's out on the waiver wire and you're like, I've got a lot of bad options, like maybe I'm still holding on to hope for Isaiah Likely, you probably need to be starting Dalton Schultz over him.
I actually think this could be a decent Isaiah Likely week. We'll get to that later in the show, actually. We talked about that a bit on the Thursday show.
Homerism sneaking in early.
No, it's not homerism. I prefer Andrews.
Oh, it's not. Okay.
We'll get to it later. What I was going to say is, you said if you're struggling at tight end. I promise people listening are struggling at tight end. I guarantee.
Yes, everybody is.
All right, next question. Broncos at Jets. I'm curious what you guys make of the Broncos defense in general in terms of what it means for fantasy going against it. Is this a defense to be feared to the point of affecting weekly rankings for opposing players? Like, obviously, we're not going to be sitting Breece Hall or Garrett Wilson, although Garrett Wilson going up against Patrick Surtain is like super unappealing. But is there anybody else really on either side of this matchup even worth playing given the defenses that we have here, Fitz?
I'm not really worried about running backs going against the Denver defense. I think their run defense has been like perfectly average so far. The Broncos have allowed the fewest passing yards through 3 weeks, and they're giving up just 5.7 yards per pass attempt. But then again, it's not like they have faced a murderer's row of quarterbacks so far. Geno Smith, Justin Fields, Baker Mayfield. So, I think the only thing we really have to worry about with our fantasy matchups, as you mentioned, Patrick Surtain, and he does shadow, but Debro, you would know this better than I do. You look at the coverages carefully when you're doing the primer. Does Surtain follow guys into the slot?
Ooh, good question, Fitzy.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like he's shadowing the outside guys, but I feel like Wilson's probably going to get some slot snaps, and I don't know if Surtain has been traveling with outside receivers who occasionally line up in the slot.
He's been following guys so I was going to bring that point up. I mean, he has followed guys up to 95% of routes. So I think, so right now he's got 11 slot snaps on the season. So specifically, up to 7 in week 2. So I think he will particularly follow guys. And you saw that last week. I think it's a good point, Fitzy. Garrett Wilson almost went 50-50, as far as outside versus slot usage. So it is a really good point to bring up. So I think they'll be able to get Garrett off of him some, but I think you're still going to see Surtain on him at least 50 to maybe 60 to 70% of his routes. I mean, Surtain has been so good. There's only a 3-pack of shadow corners in the NFL that I am so worried about on a weekly basis. It's Surtain, it's Joey Porter Jr., and it's Christian Gonzalez. That are the only guys that are truly shadowing and really making a difference right now. So yeah, I mean, just to give Surtain a little bit more shine here, he followed Metcalf, Evans, and George Pickens on 71 to 95% of the routes. None of those guys got over 30 receiving yards in his primary coverage. So he's a dude.
So where are we ranking Garrett Wilson then?
I'm going to be bumping him down. I mean, right now I've got him at, still kind of going through ranks. I've got him at wide receiver 20. So somewhere in that low end wide receiver 2 tier, like I think he could still get somewhere in the 40 to 50 receiving yard range and get a touchdown and save his day as like a wide receiver 2. But I have no higher hopes than that.
Fitz, it looks like you've got him ranked quite a bit higher.
I do. I've got him wide receiver 9, and maybe I need to bump that down a little. But it's just Wilson is really good himself. Like I don't want to totally fade guys because good receivers can win those matchups against really top cornerbacks. And Aaron Rodgers is a dude who can fit a ball through a portal. Like he is so pinpoint. You don't need a lot of cushion for Aaron Rodgers to be able to thread a throw into Garrett Wilson. So I don't want to totally fade him. Like I'm not benching Garrett Wilson for Darnell Mooney.
Yeah, I mean that's fair. But so I guess on the other side, are we now more interested in Alan Lazard or Tyler Conklin because we think Wilson might be neutralized to a degree?
Am I? Oh, sorry.
Either of you guys.
D-Bro, you're going to have a hard time interesting me in Alan Lazard.
I mean, I am. I mean, he keeps producing, guys. I mean, if Garrett's not getting the target volume, Mike Williams is healthier, but still not drawing a lot of targets here. I mean, I know nobody wants to hear it. Alan Lazard, wide receiver 18 in fantasy points per game right now. He's tied for the team lead with 5 red zone targets. Like, it's a thing. Alan Lazard is. So I think that if you see Surtain on Wilson a lot, that means that Alan Lazard is going to be matched up with Riley Moss a lot, who has allowed a 75% catch rate, 112 passer rating in his coverage. Good matchup. So as well as Denver runs a lot of single high. So far this year, Alan Lazard versus single high, his yards per route run have been at 2.1. So it's good numbers across the board, man. So I've got interest in Alan Lazard as like a flex play as well as Braelon Allen. I mean, Denver can't stop anybody on the ground. We're talking about a defense that's allowed that bottom 12 and explosive run rate allowed and yards after contact per attempt. And Braelon Allen the Braelon Allen we saw in college versus the Braelon Allen we're seeing in the NFL, I think are very different in the sense that the problem that I have with Braelon Allen as a prospect was not the size, was not the physicality. It was the fact that he ran like he thought he was a 5'9", 190 back where he could juke guys or no, you're not. You are giant. You are massive. You are mutant. You need to run dudes over. You need to get downhill and be physical. And that's what we're seeing in the NFL. And Braelon Allen, on a per-touch basis, is top 5 in both yards after contact per attempt and missed tackles forced per attempt. So while in a game that we're talking about other guys being playable, I think Lazard is in that equation. I think Wilson is fine as a wide receiver too. I also think this is a game where the Jets just are not going to have to throw the ball a ton because Denver's not that good. The Jets defense is that good. And if they smother them, this is a game where we're talking about Braelon Allen as an RB3. He could walk away this week as an RB2 if he gets late game runs, salting the clock away, and we see them managing Breece Hall's touches in the fourth quarter.
Imagine if he went to Dallas. How much more exciting that would be. I loved Fitz knows this from the Dynasty show. I loved Braelon Allen actually as a prospect. The only reason I came off of him in fantasy is the landing spot. It's just because I was so high on Breece Hall. I was like, there's just no way. If he went anywhere else, I was all over him, just as in a weaker running back class. Mm-hmm. I loved Braelon Allen. Can
you imagine what he would be doing? Even if he was on the Chargers, the 2-headed monster of him and Dobbins,
anywhere other than
so many other places,
anywhere other than the Jets, the Falcons, the Niners, the place with the elite guys, anywhere else, I just would have been so over the moon for him. Yeah. So I'm happy to see he's doing well though. Let's go to Saints at Falcons, divisional matchup here. The very so far unstoppable Saints offense was finally stopped in week 3 against Philadelphia. Will they look more like that team against the Falcons here in week 4, or more like the team that dominated and was unstoppable in weeks 1 and 2, Fitz?
They were never going to be able to keep up that sort of pace for an entire season. Derek Carr is pretty well established in fantasy as a mid-range to low-end QB2. Now in a good system with a good play caller and a good supporting cast, and I think Clint Kubiak's system is a good one. Maybe Derek Carr can be a high-end to mid-range QB2, and this offense can be solidly above average. But here's the thing, the usage tree for the Saints is skinny. It does not have a lot of branches. It's Alvin Kamara, it's Chris Olave, it's Rashid Shaheed. And those guys are going to account for a huge percentage of the yardage and touchdowns on this team. I think all 3 of those guys, including Shaheed, can be powerful engines for fantasy teams.
Debro, you are our resident Saints guy. What do you think about the difference we saw in week 3 compared to weeks 1 and 2 for this offense?
Man, I really didn't see them getting just stomped like they did last week. I didn't give enough credence, I guess, to the Philadelphia Eagles pass rush because, to be honest, we hadn't seen it to that point. But my worry for Derek Carr is the superpowers that have kind of made him just crush in week 1 and week 2. Atlanta's been pretty good versus it. I mean, we're talking about a defense that, look, Derek Carr, it's been all play action. The problem is Atlanta's been really good as far as defending play action. I mean, right now, they have faced the most play action passing attempts in the NFL right now, and they're holding offenses to the 8th lowest play action yards per attempt and 0 play action touchdowns, as well as the offensive line's banged up now. Eric McCoy, hurt. The offensive line, the rest of it is not playing amazing. There's only so much you can do with that as far as scheme. And Atlanta's secondary has been playing pretty good outside of A.J. Terrell being up and down and pulling his best Marshawn Lattimore impression. I think this really comes down to the Saints wide receivers are going to need to separate and do it quickly. And Carr is going to need to get the ball out of his hands with the way the status of this offensive line. If they can't do that, if Atlanta can press them at the line and jam them up, both Shaheed and Olave, and they can't get open early in their routes and get the ball out of Carr's hands, I think right now the median I'm looking at right now is it's probably a shade in between what we saw last week and week 1 and week 2. So Carr looks okay, but not great. I think the floor is low here, though.
TD, Tutty, taking it to the house, in for 6. Whatever you call a touchdown, one thing's for sure, touchdowns matter more at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, on the ground, in the air, from the special teams or defense. We don't care how they score, and we just want to bet on touchdowns. And DraftKings Sportsbook is delivering. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple like picking a player to score a touchdown or how many touchdowns will be in a game. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your pick. There are a few stellar matchups in week 4, including Arizona-Washington with the highest point total of the week, right at 50 points. Definitely expecting lots of touchdowns in that one. Plus, the primetime schedule is awesome, highlighted by Ravens-Bills on Sunday Night Football. Ravens laying 2.5 points. Seahawks-Lions on Monday Night Football. Those Lions laying 3.5 points. Lines and odds are subject to change on those, of course. Ready to do a touchdown dance of your own? New DraftKings customers bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Score big with DraftKings Sportsbook, the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code FANTASYPROS. That's code FANTASYPROS for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. All right, guys, next question here. Steelers at Colts. On a scale from 1 to 10, what is our concern level for Anthony Richardson and the Colts passing game, both for this very scary matchup going up against Pittsburgh and also kind of looking ahead to the rest of the season, Debra?
For this week, an 8. For the rest of the season, probably like a 6, 5.5, 6. Like, I think Anthony Richardson, the thing about it is we always knew there were going to be ebbs and flows. He's still a guy that needed more starts. And I'm old enough to remember, because it happened, guys. And I know that we're so quick and the recency bias is real. We all remember what happened in week 1, right? We all remember Anthony Richardson torching what we think is a strong Houston secondary and defense of week 1, right? Okay. So it's not like we've seen 3 straight games of Anthony Richardson just looking bad. And it's also not all been his fault. 8th most drops amongst his wide receivers this year. So I don't think Anthony Richardson has played great over the last 2 weeks. I am very worried about him in this matchup. But again, where are we going to be ranking Anthony Richardson next week when he plays the freaking Jacksonville Jaguars, guys? So while I'm worried about him this week, I'm not pressing the panic, the insanity, the I need to trade him away, bench him, cut him, or whatever type of stuff. We're still going to get rushing equity out of him. And that's always been the secret sauce. So I think Shane Steichen is also, like, we still consider him one of the best coordinators in the freaking NFL. And I think they're going to get this figured out in the long haul.
You would really say he torched the Texans. He completed 9 passes in week 1.
What was his yards per attempt? Did we all watch the immaculate throw that probably is going to end up on the highlight reel of the best throws in the NFL for the entire season?
It was an amazing throw. And obviously, I'm not complaining about the total fantasy output. He had a rushing touchdown in that game, too. But it's hard to look at a guy who went 9 for 19 and just framing it as he torched that secondary, I guess, feels extreme to me. Fitz, I mean, am I wrong here?
Not wrong, but
11.2 yards per attempt. But okay.
But I'm like fundamentally on the side of Debro here. And I mean, Debro's at 6 or 8 or whatever for his level of concern. I'm at 2.5. I want to err on the side of patience with a quarterback who has the sort of rushing potential that Anthony Richardson has. And Debro mentioned it. Like, do we still think Shane Steichen is a high quality offensive architect? I do. Like, I still have faith in Steichen. And just as a reminder, I'm going to mention a stat that I mentioned like ad nauseum in the offseason about Anthony Richardson, how last year Josh Allen led all fantasy quarterbacks all quarterbacks in fantasy scoring. And Anthony Richardson still averaged 19.4% more points per snap than Josh Allen did last year. And granted, that was a limited sample size for Richardson, who really only started and finished 2 games. But in those 2 games, he averaged better than 25 fantasy points a game and finished quarterback 4 and quarterback 2 in those 2 weeks. So, yes, Richardson has been pretty bad as a passer this season. Completion percentage is 49.3%. And yes, he has an NFL high 6 interceptions, some of which have been so ill-advised they would make Will Levis blush. But at the same time, Richardson is averaging 8 yards per attempt. Like, he hits on big plays. That's 6th in the NFL among quarterbacks right now. He is ahead of Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Kyler Murray, Joe Burrow, Aaron Rodgers in yardage per attempt. It shows that he can at least make big plays in the passing game, and we know what Richardson is capable of as a runner. So I am begging people who are ready to pull the ripcord on Anthony Richardson, like, do not get rid of him.
It's 3 games, guys, and they just got Josh Downs back. It's 3 games. Like, people need to quit freaking out as much as they're doing right now. Just saying.
So with this question, I did also mention the passing offense in general. So I am in full agreement in terms of like Anthony Richardson as a fantasy asset. The rushing alone, like, it almost doesn't matter what else is going on with the arm because of the rushing upside he gives you. As far as the passing offense in general, though, if a guy's version of torching a defense is 9 completions, and I'm kind of being tongue-in-cheek about that, but can we be confidently starting like Michael Pittman Jr. and Josh Downs? I mean, Alec Pierce obviously is among the league leaders in fantasy points so far this season with a couple of big plays. But Debra, what are you doing with the pass catchers in this game?
I mean, I'm muting all of them. I just talked about Joey Porter Jr. being awesome. Michael Pittman's going to see him for most of the game, so good luck there. Josh Downs in his first game back. People want to talk about his first read share and stuff like that. Let's not get it twisted, people. He had a 1.8 ADOT. Okay, it was like 40% of his targets were design targets. So let's not get crazy out there and be like, oh, Josh Downs is the wide receiver 1 in this offense. Like, come on. So I mean, again, the Pittsburgh Steelers pass defense is one of the best in the NFL right now. And I don't see that changing as long as they stay healthy. So I'm very, very concerned. Like, I would be benching or sending most of these guys. Like they're all wide receiver, low end. Like Pittman right now, I've got him at, I got to look at where I got him on my ranks. I probably got him as a wide receiver 3 right now. Right on the borderline, like wide receiver 37. And I think that's where he should be because, again, we talk about passing volume, but also Joey Porter Jr. So I don't want to start any of these Colts pass catchers this week.
Fitz, just quickly on the pass catchers.
Same. I mean, Pittman is playable most weeks, but I kind of want to avoid it if I can this week against the tough matchup with Porter.
Let's get into some of the later slate matchups for Sunday. Question number 7, Commanders at Cardinals. Both of these offenses are humming and have been for a lot of the season. Which players in this game have the best chance to lead their respective positions in fantasy scoring this week? You can talk Kyler and Jaden at quarterback. You can talk, Brian Robinson and James Conner at running back if you want. You can talk Marvin Harrison Jr., Terry McLaurin. Which of these guys do you think is the best chance to lead their positions in scoring this week, Fitz?
Well, let's see. I've got Kyler ranked QB1 this week and Jaden ranked QB4. So Kyler with a pretty good chance.
I actually didn't know you had him ranked 1 when I put this together. That's great.
Yeah, I mean, Marvin Harrison Jr. with no Trey McBride, likely, because of a concussion. Marvin has only had 1 game this season with double-digit targets. He had 11 last week against the Lions. I would love to see him have a Malik Neighbors game with 13 or 14 targets and just see what kind of numbers he could put up against this Washington Commanders defense that's just a welcome mat for wide receivers. And even though Eckler is out with a concussion, which leaves Brian Robinson Jr. as potentially a workhorse running back this week, I'm still going to go with James Conner having the better chance to absolutely go nuts against Washington. The Commanders have given up a league-high 791 rushing yards and a league-high 9 rushing touchdowns to running backs this season.
D-Bro, what do you think? Obviously, you've been the Jaden Daniels guy. Do you think he could finish QB1 this week? Or are you more leaning towards the Kyler and kind of Cardinals side, just given how porous that Commanders defense is?
Yeah, I mean, I think Jaden can walk away with a better game than even Kyler this week. And this is not me shading Kyler. I like Kyler. The matchup speaks for itself. Fitzy laid it out perfectly. But James Conner, the matchup is fantastic. I think that if there's a game where you can lean on the running back, you can lean on your ground game, and yes, Kyler's going to be a part of that. I think James Conner has a fantastic chance to be the RB1 overall this week. I don't think it's crazy. I mean, Washington's been terrible at stopping the run. He's getting all the work in the backfield. Trey Benson has not looked good or really been much of a factor to this point. But if it's not James Conner, then yeah, I'll throw more hot water on Jaden Daniels, man. He looked fantastic. This is a coming out party. Arizona has not been tested. They have faced the second lowest passing attempts this season. Make no mistake, people. Their secondary is not good. When Sean Murphy-Bunting is one of your best corners, you've got a problem. Jaden Daniels, we just saw what he did versus Cincinnati. I think the encore is coming right now. As long as Arizona, and we think they're going to, they push back and push the Commanders in this game, I think we're just going to see another miraculous performance from Jaden Daniels.
I mentioned when talking about DraftKings that this is the highest total of the week. It started at 50.5. I think it went down to 50. I'm going to pull up to see if it's changed at all this morning. What's the case for them going under? Because I just feel like this is I know it's kind of a sucker's bet. Just be like, oh, highest total of the week. It's that for a reason. It's going to be fun to bet the over. But the way these offenses look and the way the defenses are, I just don't see how this game isn't played in the 50s. D-Bro, what do you think about betting?
Pace of play. That's the only way. Neither one of these offenses are running really fast. So the only way that this game doesn't hit the over, it's not because the defenses, it's just because of overall play volume. That's the only way. But I think you're looking at fine. If they don't hit the over on 49.5 or 50.5, depending on where you're getting the line at, it's going to be really close.
You don't need to run that many plays when you score every possession like the Commanders have for 2 weeks in a row.
True.
You can find this at 49.5 some places, 50.5 some places. We prefer DraftKings Sportsbook where it's right at 50. Fitz, what do you think about that total?
Yeah, I mean, the only case for the under, I guess, is that the average NFL game has produced 40.5 points this season. So, I mean, this would have to be a really souped up offensive battle for this to go over. And like you never know. You get just one like 6.5 minute drive that results in a turnover at the other team's 10-yard line, and all of a sudden you're over, like just crumbles away.
I do think that this is not specific to this game, I do think we are now into the time of the year where we have seen enough of the shaking off the rust of players not playing in preseason anymore. Like this kind of week 3, week 4 range is where I think typically in this era of players not playing in August that we start to see offenses really kind of become a little more fully fleshed out, fully formed. So maybe that takes place in this game, maybe it doesn't. But I do think that the early games being pretty low total scoring in general, I think we're hopefully kind of getting out of that at this point. We'll see how it ends up playing out.
Maybe, Worm, the under is already 1-0 in week 4.
Yeah, maybe. It's a good point. All right, question number 8. Chiefs at Chargers. Is Xavier Worthy a must bench for the time being? He's had 2 catches for 17 yards in back-to-back weeks. The same stat line both of those weeks. Has not scored a touchdown since week 1. Just 11 total targets on the season. It's one of those things where you would hate to sit him and then he blows up for another 2 touchdown game. And so maybe that's, setting your lineup out of fear more than out of, being unemotional and making the right decision based on what he's done. But Debro, what are you doing with Worthy? Because I am starting him in the one league I have him in. I kind of don't have a choice in that league though. But if you have a choice at all, are you looking elsewhere?
I think it depends. It comes down to what your options are. I don't think he's a much bench player, but right now, like I've got him at wide receiver 35 in my ranks. I would start him over Brian Thomas Jr., Michael Pittman, Jalen Waddle, Calvin Ridley, Lab McConkey, a lot of different guys. So, I think he's still in that wide receiver 3 type of area code. And it really kind of comes down to matchups and what else you got on your roster. I think because the other thing we need to talk about the Chargers too, they could be without a few of their defensive pieces this week. Derwin James is already out. Bosa might not play. Justin Herbert, we don't even know if he's going to play or not. So, this could be a sneaky get right game for the Chiefs offense.
Fitz, what do you think about Worthy? He's one blown coverage not happening away from having been totally unplayable from the pass catching. At least he did have the rushing touchdown, but as a pass catcher, that blown coverage is the only reason he's been playable so far in his young career.
Yeah, so I'm with Debro as far as the ranking. I've got him down in the Michael Pittman zone of low end wide receiver 3, high end wide receiver 4. The debate I was having is Debro mentioned 2 of the guys, the 2 Jaguars, Kirk and Brian Thomas Jr. I think Worthy is right with those guys. I think whether you play him is kind of it depends a lot on context, not only what your other options are, but what your game situation is. Like Worthy is more so strength loves certainty and weakness loves risk. If you are a heavy underdog in your game, Worthy might be the guy who can land the sort of haymakers you need to beat a heavily favored opponent. Whereas if you are going up against some injury-riddled team that you are favored to beat by like 15 points, I'd probably want to go with a safer like Darnell Mooney type of option over Worthy, just because, Worthy hasn't had more than 4 targets in any game so far this season. And by the way, I totally got swerved on this whole Kansas City offense. I thought with Hollywood Brown, who obviously, isn't going to work out because he's not going to play, and Xavier Worthy, they would restore sort of a vertical element to this Kansas City offense. Hasn't happened. Patrick Mahomes is averaging 5.2 intended air yards per target, according to Pro Football Reference. Earlier in his career, he was averaging 8 or 9 intended air yards per pass attempt. He's down to 5.2. This is like Cliff Kingsbury has taken over Andy Reid's body. But it's the way the Chiefs are sort of being forced to play. They're saying they're playing too high against KC and saying, okay, dink and dunk your way downfield. And that's exactly what they're doing. So you can always get that big catch and run play from Xavier Worthy. That's in play for sure. Wide range of outcomes here. I think it totally depends on what your situation is.
Yeah, the other point that I want to bring up about this matchup and why I think that we could see more Mahomes in the passing game this week, it doesn't need to get lost in the sauce. The Chargers' run defense has been top shelf. So they don't have the options, much less anybody in that backfield that's talented enough to overcome a tough matchup. They're going to have to throw the ball this week. If they want to move the ball, they're going to have to throw the ball and have success there.
They might be throwing it short, man. Patrick Mahomes has topped 20 fantasy points once in his last 12 regular season games.
So painful to hear.
And in those last 12 regular season games, under 16 fantasy points 7 times.
Jeez.
Wild. Yeah, I was with you, especially in the preseason, Fitz. Like I was all in on Mahomes, like bouncing back as an elite fantasy option this season. I thought it was going to be a bunch of rushing quarterbacks, but Mahomes kind of the one non-rusher in that group, at the top of the rankings. And
Kelsey looks like he's running in peanut butter.
I was very much fading Kelsey this draft season. A lot of it was because I was just assuming they were going to intentionally save him for January. He also just doesn't look very good. It's a long season. Maybe he is just kind of, internally saving himself for January. And, we know that the 3-peat is all this team really cares about, but yeah, it's not been what I expected it to be through the first 3 weeks. Let's go to Sunday Night Football. Bills at Ravens. Maybe the game of the week. Looks like a really fun one. 2 awesome quarterbacks. Josh Allen, like pretty clearly, I think would be the MVP if we were voting right now. Obviously, still early in the year, going up against the defending reigning MVP. I am going to bring up the tight ends. I don't know why Debro called me a homer, because both Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely are ranked in the top 10 according to our expert consensus rankings for this week. And I'm curious. I'll start with you, Debro, since you're shaking your head. Do you think that one of them can take advantage of this matchup? And the Bills defense somewhat banged up a bit in areas that maybe Andrews and Likely can take advantage of. The Ravens typically play well at home in prime time. Is it smart to be ranking either of these guys or both theoretically, like they are in ECR, as top 10 options this week?
I've got Mark Andrews at tight end 10, but it's more of the fact that there's nobody else to put above him. Yeah. That's the problem.
That's fair.
Really, it's the state of the position, man. Nobody is good and everybody's hurt. Sam Laporta, George Kittle, if both of them were playing, Mark Andrews probably wouldn't be a tight end 1 this week, So that's really the state of the tight end position more than it's having any kind of faith. And I'm sorry, when Todd Monken comes out and he's like, I didn't know Mark Andrews was not on the field last week. I hate quotes like that out of coaches where they're like, well, we would like to get this guy more snaps, or I'm not aware of that. Bro, you make the decisions. You make the decisions about who goes out there and who plays and the snaps they play and how things go. You're telling me you don't come on. So no, I don't have a lot of faith in either one of them, man. I'm like, Mark Andrews, we're still talking about a Bills defense that has allowed the 5th lowest yards per reception to the tight end position. And they face the 3rd most tight end targets because teams are like, we don't want to go against those corners. So I look at the Baltimore offense. It's all over the map. I think Todd Monken is flailing as a play caller. Looking at what they've done every single week makes no sense. Anybody that while Lamar walked away from the Kansas City Chiefs game and Likely did with good stat lines, it was basically dump it off, broken play, Lamar, go make magic. We don't know what we're going to do. And then they played Dallas and it was like, well, we're going to run the ball with Derrick Henry. And then towards the end of the game, they take their foot off the gas. They're like, I guess we're going to keep running the ball because we don't know what else we're going to do. Or we're going to throw short screens to Zay Flowers. I just don't think Todd Monken has a lot of really good answers about what to do with the offense. And a lot of this comes back to we were worried about the offensive line coming into the season. I think this offensive line has gone from a problem to it could be the absolute iceberg for the Titanic of this offense, to where they're trying to find ways to overcome the offensive line to make the offense functional with the way that the offensive line is playing. And I just don't see any way where I get Mark Andrews and they need to pass block and they got heavy sets and all this kind of stuff. Any iteration where you take arguably your best pass catcher and you take him out of the equation about how you plan to function as an offense is not smart in any way, shape, form, or fashion. So I don't know why Baltimore is favored in this game. I've already bet Buffalo. I think Buffalo stomps them this week.
So I think you're wrong about them stopping them. I do think Buffalo wins. I don't think the Ravens should be.
How do you think Baltimore moves the ball outside of running the ball with Derrick Henry?
Well, I think that will be effective.
No, but that's it, right? Like, what else are they going to do? Like,
I think that Andrews and likely can do well against. I mean, who of the Broncos? You mentioned that the Broncos have done a good job of like limiting tight ends. They face the Jaguars without Evan Ingram. They face the Dolphins. Like, I know they faced Trey McBride in week 1, but like, it's not like they've been going up against a murderer's row of tight ends. And I think you're overreacting a bit to the play calling for the first 3 weeks. We've talked a lot on the show about how I'm a very strong believer that
Trey McBride, week 1, 30 receiving yards.
Yeah, no, that one was good. But the other two, who were the tight ends they were going up against that scare you?
I know, but Buffalo's also been historically a really good or a terrible matchup, I should say, for tight ends.
I think the Ravens will be able to move the ball in this game. Again, I agree the Bills are good. I think the Bills are the better team, and I think the Bills should be favored. I said it in an early week episode. I was confused why the Ravens
that line doesn't make any
sense
to me.
Outside of just the whole at home and prime time, and they're usually good there, but that's narrative driven. That's not based on the way the teams look right now. So I agree with you in that sense. I've said before, I don't think you can take anything away from what the Ravens do against the Chiefs. They always play them differently. Whether like they shouldn't do that. I don't think they should lose their minds. They always do.
Agreed.
And then they didn't need to do anything against the Cowboys. Like I like they were fine to keep running the ball. The reason the Cowboys came back in that game was because of a fluky onside kick recovery and because the defense didn't do a good enough job of shutting them down. Like I don't blame the offense for that one. And in the Raiders game, and Fitz, I'll toss to you now. We talked about this on the Thursday show. That was the one game where Andrews, I mean, he didn't catch a touchdown. If he did, that looks like a pretty good day relative to the tight end landscape this season. It's not some big blow up game, but the other two games besides that Raiders game are a game where Lamar threw the ball 15 times because he didn't really need to throw anymore. And then the Chiefs, which they always play differently. So what do you think about the tight ends in this matchup?
Yeah. And by the way, I am betting the Ravens. Worm, do you really think the John Harbaugh Ravens are going to lay 2 complete eggs at home back to back? I kind of have a hard time seeing it. I think they're going to be breathing fire after the way they played against the Raiders the last
I just think Josh Allen is breathing fire all the time right now.
And Baltimore pass defense has also been sneaky bad to open the season.
So out of these two, like I kind of don't want to play Isaiah Likely, who in the 2 games since that week 1 explosion has had 3 catches for 30 yards on 4 targets. Like we're back to where we were, it seems like, where as long as Mark Andrews was on the field, you couldn't play Isaiah Likely. But the weird thing is that it's hard to play Mark Andrews either. I do have him tight end 8, and I'm not totally ready to wave the white flag on him. I don't know what's up with him. Is it health? I mean, he had the offseason tightrope surgery that slowed down Tony Pollard early last season. He was in a car crash in August that caused him to miss practices and training camp. Only 21 snaps last week, but John Harbaugh said it was because they were using this heavy personnel package with Patrick Ricard and Charlie Kohler at tight end. I don't know if it's health related, if it's just that small sample size, 3 games. He did have a decent game in week 2 where he had 4 catches. I'm just not ready to throw in the towel. I'm concerned for sure. And I've got Mark Andrews on a few teams, but I'm not ready to give it up or start like Zach Ertz in place of Mark Andrews.
I will say here, I don't think it's a Mark Andrews problem. I don't. If you look at just his separation scores and his route win rate amongst 42 qualifying tight ends, he has a better separation score. He's first. He has a better separation score than Trey McBride, and he's 4th in win rate. So I don't think this is a Mark Andrews problem. I think this is a Todd Monken problem.
I think I would put more of the blame for any offensive struggles so far this season. And by the way, I think the Ravens are still number 1 offense in DVOA so far, which I was shocked by. I don't know how that's calculated, but I saw Aaron Schatz tweeting about that earlier this week. The offensive line to me is a much bigger concern than Todd Monken.
Yeah.
And it I actually think looked better against Dallas. It's easy to look better against Dallas. To be fair, I think they looked better against Dallas than they did in the first 2 weeks. And I think Roger Rosengarten will get better throughout the season. Andrew Voorhees might miss this game on the left side, left guard. So that's going to be a tough one against Buffalo. But yeah, to me, the offensive line is the larger concern.
Do you think Linderbaum plays this week? Because I saw he was on the injury report too.
Yeah, the way they've talked doesn't they don't seem to be worried about him not playing.
Okay.
He was limited in practice. He went from did not practice on Wednesday to limited on Thursday. I suppose it's possible. You never know. But from what I have seen and heard, it doesn't seem like it seems like Voorhees is the only one that is a major threat to miss on the offense.
Yeah, and line. Voorhees hasn't practiced all week. So yeah, I agree.
So I think he probably misses. I think you probably see Patrick McCarry scoot over. Maybe Josh Jones comes off the bench. I'm not sure what they're going to do. So the offensive line, again, we don't need to put any more time into this one, but that's to me the larger concern. Let's go to Seahawks at Lions to wrap things up here. Question number 10. We saw down weeks last Sunday for both Jameson Williams and Jaxon Smith-Njigba. Which of these receivers, young, exciting guys who, we have a degree of belief in both of them from what we've seen so far this season and what we liked about them as prospects, which of those two do we think that has the best chance of bouncing back in this particular matchup on Monday Night Football, Fitz?
I'll go with JSN, just because the Lions have a pass funnel defense, much better against the run than they are against the pass. Good chance Seattle is pass heavy this week. They're underdogs, and they're already a little pass heavier than league average. With Jameson Williams, I worry that, well, one, the Seahawks have a really nice collection of cornerbacks, and two, sometimes there are weeks where Ben Johnson just decides he wants to run the ball down an opponent's throat. And we saw the Lions play that kind of game last week against the Cardinals. Mm-hmm. And when Ben Johnson calls a game like that, maybe Amon-Ra St. Brown can survive it and put up good numbers, but I don't know if Jameson Williams can.
Debra?
Yeah, I mean, I still think if you got JMO, you're starting him this week. That's why I put him as a no-brainer because, it's one game when we saw him drop to 3 targets. I don't think it, consistently happens. So if you got him, you're playing him. But I'm with Fitzy here. I think JSN has the better game this week. Quietly, Detroit, while, yes, I agree with Fitzy, they have an elite run defense. They were elite last year. They're elite this year. They've quietly been a slot funnel. Passing attacks have been targeting the slot religiously against them. They faced the second most slot targets so far this year, and they've given up the third most receiving yards to opposing slot wide receivers. So JSN has been up and down, up and down. I mean, it's been like no targets. You're a focal point of the offense, back to no targets. Don't know why Seattle's doing that, but I think we get the bounce back game from JSN this week.
Where are you ranking them?
Good question, Worm. I have got Jameson Williams is at wide receiver 24, and I've got JSN at wide receiver 23.
Oh, so back to back. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Fitz, where did you mention where you have them ranked?
Yeah, I've got to put my money where my mouth is because right now I've got JSN ranked behind Jameson Williams. I need to change that.
Okay. All right, we'll get out of the show on that one. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Best of luck in your Week 4 matchups. We're past the overreaction season. We're past we're just kind of getting back into it. This is the season, so we're getting into it. Bye week start next week, which is wild to consider. So for Debra and Fitz, I'm Ryan Wormeli. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We'll see you again next week.